Hi, welcome to the WELS History Channel. Today we're with Professor Joel Otto from Wisconsin Lutheran Seminary, and we're going to ask him what's one person in WELS history more people should know about.
I would say that one for sure, 20th century, mid 20th century, would be President Oscar J. Naumann. He was the longest serving Synod president. Well, it's a coin flip between he and Johannes Bading, but he served for 26 years, and it was at a time when our Synod was going through drastic changes. Uh, when he begins his tenure as president, he gets elected in 1953. He had been serving as Minnesota district president for about 5 years prior to his election, and during those 5 years, he had also been elected as one of the Synod vice presidents. And he's fairly young. I mean, he's in his early 40s, I believe, when he gets elected. Uh, and he's replacing President Brenner, who had decided to step back from the presidency. President Brenner had been serving for 20 years. He was nearing 80 years old, and decided it was time for a younger man. So it wasn't like the synod was, voting somebody out or anything like that. But Naumann came in, and comes in at a time when the break with the discussions about that led to the break with the Missouri Synod were at its height. He had to navigate the synod through those difficult years of the 1950s. He was also pastor for the first 6 years of his presidency. He was also one of the pastors at a very large church in St. Paul, St. John Lutheran. So he was both synod president and parish pastor, which just boggles the mind. Uh, his files at the synod archives are full of letters and the responses he writes, and I just can't imagine the time that he took, that it would have taken to respond to all that correspondence. But he did. He took the time. Then he becomes the first full-time president in 1959. So then he moves to Milwaukee, and eventually new synod headquarters is established on North Avenue, and so he's part of that beginning of kind of a more formal and growing synod administration. Uh, After navigating the synod through the break with Missouri in 1961, uh, for the next his next 18 years of his presidency saw I would say the most extensive growth that the Wisconsin Synod has experienced in all facets of ministry. Already in the 1950s, you had numerous building projects taking place on the ministerial education campuses in Watertown, um, New Ulm, Saginaw, even Mobridge. Those continued throughout the 60s and 70s, including some building projects at the seminary as well. Uh, and those were necessary because the called workers were necessary, and the campuses weren't equipped to be able to handle all the new students that they knew were needed and knew were coming. And then he just oversaw the expansion in mission work, both home and abroad. On the home mission front, um, in 1961, we were in 16 states. By 1979, we were almost in all 50. We didn't quite. The goal was every state by 78. He didn't quite make it, but pretty close. I think we were maybe at the time of his death, there were 47, 48 states. On the world mission front, he was very much a strong supporter of world missions. He made numerous trips overseas. Um, like in 1957, he made a trip over to Japan to try to rescue our initial efforts in Japan. We lost those efforts because of some of the issues that led to the break with Missouri Synod. And so he was there, though, to welcome the new missionaries that were arriving in April of 1957. And so you see a guy who's making those trips. He made trips to other trips to Asia and Africa. And so during especially the 60s and 70s, we went from having two overseas missions, Japan and Zambia, to having mission work in it. I think it was something like 10, 11, or 9, 10 different countries. Latin America, we moved into some places in Latin America, more places in other. We added Malawi. We added a number of places in Asia. And so just all that work. And then in the 60s and 70s, you also saw a number of different areas of ministry growing, campus ministries in Madison and other places. The first International Youth Rally takes place. You have the first administrator in 1973 for special ministries. So since we couldn't rely on the Missouri Synod to do a lot of that work, we now had to um, do that work ourselves. And so Naumann's the guy at the helm, kind of overseeing that. And one comment that people would make about Oscar J. Naumann is he was a guy who trusted people to do their work, which then created a great deal of trust in him on the part of those other leaders. So like, like an Edgar Heinecke who's in the world missions, and Norman Berg who's home missions, and people like that. They highly respected President Naumann. I think I would say he was very beloved in the church body by many of the especially probably the called workers, the pastors in particular. Um, I think many of them really just greatly appreciated his leadership. Uh, his wife had died, I believe it was in 1975, and in 1979 he was prepared to step down to retire. But in June, just a month or so before the Synod convention, he suffered a stroke and was called home to heaven. And so then he was replaced by the first vice president, Karl Mischke, who then got elected at the Synod convention later in the summer of '79. So, um, and it was kind of a big loss for our Synod, even though he was preparing to retire anyway. But to serve as president for 26 years, as the Wisconsin Synod went from uh, I guess you might say being just a little more of a regional church body to being truly a nationwide and really worldwide church body in the quarter century or so that he was serving. And so when you talk about presidents, important presidents in the history of the Wisconsin Synod, I would put O.J. Naumann up there, probably right up there with Bodding as far as significant leaders at a time in our synod's history where that leadership was needed. He was just, you again see God providing the right people at the right time. And I would say President O.J. Naumann was certainly that man.
All right, thank you, Professor Otto, for your thoughts on Oscar Naumann.